Hello, everybody. We're back for another week of Blumira Briefings, your quick download of the top headlines that you may not have caught over the last week. I'm joined by some of our other in-house experts here at Blumira. My name is Zoe Lindsay. I'm a security strategist here, and I'll be getting to lead our session. Let's go around the horn. Everybody say hi real quick.
I'm Matt Warner. I'm the founder and CEO of Blumira.
Mike Toole here, Director IT and Security for Blumira.
Hey, and I'm Jake Ouellette. I'm on the detection engineering team, so I deal with all the detections and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I'm very excited that you're able to join us today, Jake, because I think we've got a couple of stories where you're going to have some really good perspective for folks. So as we always do, we'll start off with kind of a quick recap of what we've seen in the Blumira platform over the last week. So Matt, what are some of the top trends that we've been seeing since we met last?
Sure, yeah. So lots of exciting stuff, although we're actually down in total number of findings week over week. So everyone got a nice quieter week. It's about 20% less week over week. I couldn't tell you exactly why. Let's just say, end of month, everyone's tired. We'll go with that one. But primarily, honestly, it is a reduction in blocked websites on Sophos and a number of other things that tend to be pretty loud on the threat side for us. We did see an increase this week in internal reconnaissance, which it's always worth calling out, and I'm sure Jake sees this as well. When there are threats inside of your environment, they're going to have to do some amount of scanning to figure out where they're going to go next. Really important to think about how you segment your networks, how you're seeing the traffic inside of your broadcast networks especially, and really getting to be able to see what's happening there. That grew this year, this week, into the top 10. So that is continuing to grow. We also saw an increase in remote desktop server password spray, which is really what we're seeing is more continuous push on password spraying patterns. How can we scan? How can we touch these environments a little more often so we are able to go a little further? Also worth noting, we saw an interesting pattern this week along those lines, where someone had accidentally opened up a Radius server on their FortiGate, which then resulted in their DC locking out users without a source, because that's how Radius works when it connects back to that DC. Worth noting, if you have firewalls that allow us to sell VPN, we're checking to make sure how they're exposed to the internet and how they're authenticating back. Or if you have a bunch of lockouts you're not aware of, take a gander at how your Radius is set up when it comes to the. Yes, never hurts. On the world of suspects, and for Blumira, we talk about threats, we mean like potentially really bad thing happening. You need to go look at this. When they're suspects, we're really looking for organizations to confirm if they did or did not do something. So for us, again, you're going to hear this every week, Splashtop, TeamViewer, LogMeIn, remote desktop tools, they are the thing across a lot of different organizations. It gets a lot harder when you use one and the attackers use the other, or if an attacker uses the same one you use. So it's always worth reviewing that access. We know that it's not necessarily fun. Same thing goes for batch script execution. Those are one of those areas that always is near the top for us, top this week. On the suspect side, as Jake, I'm sure, can speak to, that threat actors are going to drop in batch files, because why wouldn't they? And if you are also running a lot of batch files, it can get hard to filter those out at times. So always worth thinking about kind of your future path for batch files. Where are you going for PowerShell scripts? How could you do this in a different way? And probably most of all, I'll just openly say, make sure those batch files are not in a place where people can write to them. You only want like 2 people in the organization who can write to those files. Otherwise, the attackers will leverage them. Then you have a sad day and it's whole thing. The last one is our risk variable. We also have an operational. We'll mostly talk about risk. And risk is things that could result in future pain for you looking forward. Last week, we talked a little bit about SMB connection from public IP, still in our top 3. We love to see people taking SMB off the internet if they can, or removing it from their DMZ if it has a public IP address. Just for the sake of your sanity, it'll make your life a lot easier. And this week at the top, we have authentication outside the US. We are primarily a focused US organization. And this is really more related to where we are seeing expansive access. If you are licensed enough for Microsoft, take a look at your conditional access policies. Make sure that you are blocking that access when someone is trying to authenticate from a place that you don't expect them to. Make them fill out a form for that access. Like, it's okay. Protect yourself if you can. Those are the top ones for this week. Again, we are down a bit this week, which is great. Primarily continuing to see this pattern of password spraying, which if you ever look at your auth logs, you will see it. If anything facing the internet is being password sprayed this moment, guaranteed. So make sure that you have 2FA on, make sure that you're monitoring those logs, and always look for successful authentication following it.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Always love getting that update. And real quick, so I think a lot of folks may not necessarily understand thinking about SIM as a security tool to monitor their environment. We're talking about threats, and I think folks expect that. Why do we include findings that are based around risks that may not be actually a threat yet?
Yeah, so one of the big areas for us is making sure that as you are leveraging a SIM, a detection platform, it doesn't matter if you're using Blumira or not, but for us, we look at it as a way to kind of give you those indicators of potential future issues, looking into what is there. SMB being exposed to the internet maybe is okay, but you really probably shouldn't do it. FTP for the internet makes total sense. And it makes sense until you start digging a little further into, well, what happens really when I expose managed file transfer solutions to the internet? What happens when someone gets a hold of this in my DMZ and they're able to do something more with it? So it's really more about kind of looking at what's there and what's available and what could become a problem. So like having a file in your Google workspace that has a clear text password, like passwords dot text in your Google share drive, it's not going to cause a problem today, but it's going to cause a problem if someone finds that file with access to that account and uses those passwords.
Absolutely.
And
So
Jake is the writer of these, so he might have some other thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say those like protocol-based detections, like the FTP and the SMB ones, a lot of times we find value in those, not in just like kind of like telling people you have like a public connection to this, but also we get people like onboarding and then they get all these FTP, SMB, and they use that as like they're like, I didn't even know I had this open. Like, what is on my network that is exposing this that could be causing these logs? So a lot of customers we have will either onboard or they'll start getting those detections and then immediately they'll go look it out. They'll turn everything off and then it'll go silent again. So that's that kind of like one of those ones where you're covering your bases and just like you don't really know what's there until you turn something on that's going to look for that stuff.
yeah, the same diagnostic tools that can potentially help you find a problem can also help you identify those risks before they become problems. Speaking of risks and problems, right up top, we're going to mention some new security flaws that were found in VMware Tools and in CrushFTP reported over the last week. We will have links in the description for the advisories and mitigation steps on these, but both of them have pretty high risk scores. So the VMware Tools exploit, CVE 2025 22230. Damn, I don't know how to do it when it's 5 numbers instead of 4. 7.8 CVSS score. It allows non-administrative users to perform privileged operations. It's affecting versions 11 and 12 software, but is fixed in 12.5.1. And then for CrushFTP, critical vulnerability, this one's a 9.8, CVE 2025-2825. And it is allowing unauthenticated access via HTTP and HTTPS ports. There's already been a proof of concept exploit released for the CrushFTP vulnerability. It's just stemming from some flaws in S3 auth header processing. So I think like this mostly is to make sure that folks know these are both very popular tools. So we want to make sure that you have the information necessary to remediate. But it is kind of an interesting opportunity, what factors into a severity score? I think people see these advisories, see a CVSS score. What factors into that? What raises that rating to identify something that is more risky?
Yeah, so I can get started on that a little bit. So I really like CVSS scores. I worked with them a lot in my previous job, and then obviously on my current job doing detection opportunities, and just it really gives me a good like quick idea if it's something like I need to get on right away, or if it's something that can wait maybe a couple minutes. just by looking at that number. And then also, if I want the like granular details, you can go into the CVSS score calculation and see how they got to that number. And that does give me the more granular details in terms of like what the attack vector is, the complexity. And I think it really does a good job of like really simplifying things and standardizing how we approach things that could be a problem. Because you could write 10 pages about like one vulnerability and like a page about another vulnerability, and both of them could say the same thing, but this CVSS score is trying to distill, no matter how you talk about things, is trying to distill it down into a way that we can all understand. So it uses those vectors such as attack vector, complexity, the privileges required, user interaction, scope, and then there's some also the CIA confidentiality, integrity, and availability impact of all those things. Those are all the things that go into calculating that CVSS score.
Yep. Absolutely.
I
So
love the mention of the CIA triad. Like, beautiful. Love it.
yeah, love it. We could bring that in.
Always
So, oh, go ahead, Mike.
Nines is effectively can be reached from the internet and bypasses all controls.
Yeah, that's why it's about as high as it can go. So again, check the description. If you're using either of those pieces of software, make sure that you are updating to the latest version. Someday, when we don't have quite as much news to talk about, we'll talk about why most of the time that you see a vulnerability like that, there actually is already a fix available for it, and how that's just a matter of economics. But that's another story for another day, because we've got a lot to cover. Next up, we've got Checkpoint confirming a breach that was reported on by some security researchers. I know I saw it first shared in a LinkedIn post. Our news article today is coming from the Register. But the threat actor claimed to have accessed Checkpoint's internal data, including network maps, credentials, and source code. Checkpoint has responded. They've acknowledged the incident, but said that it was both old and, quote, pinpointed, saying it only affected only three organizations, rather, in December. And they said that that breach came from compromised credentials to a portal with limited access. And there's some questioning of how pinpointed, what the scope of that breach may have been. We're definitely going to talk a little bit about reported and acknowledged breaches a fair bit today. It's been a popular topic in the news this week. But I think a good place to start with on this is when a security vendor that someone is using acknowledges a breach, but seems to downplay what its significance is, which certainly that's not a unique situation. What are some things that they can do to try and verify or validate that, or some of the questions they should be following up with to ask that vendor? What can they do about it?
You know, it's interesting. I've seen a trend recently, and this is the case with this breach. Basically, like people, the way these are being found is like someone is posting a data set on a breach forum somewhere saying, hey, I have this data set. Here's a snippet of it. It's valid. It costs this much, right? Like that seems to be the way we're discovering these lately. This one's really interesting in that like afterwards, Checkpoint basically said, oh yeah, we figured out that was old, right? So it's like you're in this position of who do I trust, right? Like a sketchy threat actor posting on breach forums or, the company. And you can kind of do some due diligence in those situations, right? Like it's always good to reach out, ask for details. Companies will almost always give you a different story if you're a customer and you're reaching out internally. They'll usually have a more nuanced messaging to give you. That's pretty common. Or they can give you more details that they just can't post in the news or a press release. So I always recommend, like, first thing you do, open up a support ticket, right? Just ask. And then the other thing is you can also like go check out the data if you want, right? Because most of these are posted. It may not be the whole data set, but you can definitely check and see like was I even a customer then? Right? Like, would this affect me now? How would that affect me? Right? Did the data that got out, is it something that an attacker could use against me? Right? Like if I was in that breach. So that's kind of a good first step, I would say, is like for some of these breaches.
Yeah,
What's
and
it?
I'm sorry, Zoe. Didn't Lapsus like I don't know, like a year or two ago, they like even bluffed on some data that they had access to. So it's
Yeah,
entirely possible that, like you said, Mike, like they could be saying they have this stuff, but not actually have it. So
it
that's
it
crazy.
goes both ways. Like we've seen
Oh,
like
yeah.
totally legit data sets. We've seen totally fake ones. We've seen people recycle them, put two different ones together and try to say it's new. Like you just never know. But yeah, and you don't always know, right? Until the full data set's released. So it's just kind of best you can do is try to do some sleuthing yourself and reach out for answers.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
good.
it's worth also noting, and I think we'll get into this with Oracle as well, but relevant for here, when you hear a public company say it's not that bad, it was only a little bit, what they're doing is defining the materiality of the breach and saying, I didn't need to tell you about this. I didn't do wrong to the SEC by not filing a K1. I swear it's okay. So, like, remember to read between the lines when you hear some of these things. In a case where a company is being diligent, you can pull the K1 from the SEC and read some details as to how the breach went. But in the case of the two things we're going to talk about today, you're not going to find any of those details.
Which is a nice segue onto what I titled in our docs here as Oracle, a headline in 3 parts. So first we had some stories coming out around the 21st that there were reports of a breach after a hacker claimed theft of 6 million data records, which Oracle denied. The hacker said that they had gotten access through federated SSO servers. Oracle denied any breach and said, quote, there's been no breach of Oracle Cloud. The published credentials are not for Oracle Cloud. And again, a hacker had uploaded a text file to a Oracle Cloud server to prove that they had access and allegedly is trying to sell the data. Then, just a few days later, on the 26th, Oracle customers started confirming that data that had been released as supposedly part of this breach matched their data was valid. And more reporting of a file uploaded to the server. This is interesting. Definitely want to mention this. They claim to have exploited a CVE in Oracle's own Fusion middleware that has been patched. But as of the date that I think this is Bleeping Computer took a look, it looked like the server was still up and still out of date. Then, just a couple of days ago, there was another report, this time Oracle Health, saying that they faced a significant security incident. And what's interesting here is that customer organizations said that they received communication that patient data may be affected. But along with those comms saying that Oracle would not be notifying affected patients and that the affected organizations would be responsible for doing this. And this article also makes mention of kind of some generally widespread frustration about that response. So my first note on our discussion points here is what, and if I may add, I mean, just how long is the list of things that could have been done better here?
I mean, yeah, it's Oracle, so we have the specific expectations with Oracle, and they met those expectations. So I think we can all just be happy that they're still who we thought they were. There's probably a lot of suspicions to kind of put out there in regard to this. Not a huge surprise to hear it in regard to Oracle. Kind of going back to the checkpoint one as well. A lot of this, and for those of you who work for public companies in security and IT, materiality and identifying that there was a breach becomes an incredibly important thing for organizations. The moment that you identify there's a breach, a lot of things happen at that point inside the organization. And legally, there's not a lot of benefits to saying that there's a breach until you have like full proof that like, yep, that is a thing we must admit. And you're going to see more pushback from organizations with more legal support, with more kind of, we'll say, risk avoidance. And the suspicious person in me says like, well, I don't even think Oracle Health is technically under Oracle. I think they're under a different organization at this point. And did this allow them to kind of offset the Oracle breach into Oracle Health, generally speaking?
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those areas that's like it's what we expect from Oracle. No offense to Oracle. And it's an area that, we really look at this from the standpoint of security as we expect people to follow the materiality rules pretty closely if they can. Like if you get breached, you should report it. You should announce it. People should be able to prepare for it. But it all gets a lot harder when we have this kind of back and forth from the standpoint of, large multinationals who are following not necessarily the rules that other people might have to follow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a good case where I think it's important. Like we can also learn from what happened at Oracle. And the first thing that comes to mind is like trying to do tabletop exercises in your own org. I doubt Oracle is running around like they don't have tabletops or they haven't done this kind of stuff in the past before. But that is a step that I see people skip a lot when I'm usually attending tabletops is like when and where and how do we communicate a breach and like who are we talking to? Sometimes tabletops don't even include like HR or people who like legal. And that should always be part of the conversation to like make sure you're hitting those points. And there's another good cool thing about tabletops is they don't have to be made up scenarios. You can just use Oracle scenario and be like, how would we have dealt with this if it was our org? So yeah, always good to like learn from these big corps too, trying to see what you could do better if it happened to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just always remain like I've been around for a while, and I think we all kind of know about Oracle and their long history in the security world and like all the different missteps. This just feels normal, honestly. Like Matt mentioned earlier, they've had plenty of news headlines, basically trying to debunk things that are based in reality or whatever, right? Like, it's just a good reminder to, like you could, it's a good reminder to basically take a look at your stack, right? That's all I'll say. Yeah. Take a look at your stack, see who you're trusting, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, maybe you're okay with the risk, maybe you're not, right? Like it's just how it works. Yeah.
Well, and the thing that I was thinking about as I was reading through these articles is, I mean, obviously, a breach is not going to be a PR net good for any organization. But personally, when I hear about a breach, the fact that an incident has occurred is not inherently what makes me change my level of trust in that org. Finding out like how that breach occurred and finding out how they respond to it. If they are upfront and frank about disclosing that, if they communicate with their customers before their feet are held to the fire, those are things that are going to have a much bigger impact on kind of how I slot my trust level of that org going forward.
Yeah, I would just say like all you have to do is look and see how vendors treat their customers, and it tells a lot, right? Like, what are they focused on, right? Like, is the first thing they do basically, no, sorry, like, I don't know what you're talking about, or is it somewhat helpful for your situation, even if it's not exactly admitting to guilt or whatever, right? Like, like you can definitely, like, even if they weren't breached, they could be a lot more helpful.
Right. That's a good way to put it. I'm going to skip down to our threat news because since we have Jake here, I think it's great to kind of tap into some of his perspective. So Had an interesting write-up on a fake Zoom installer that ended up deploying BlackSuit ransomware through a multi-stage attack chain. And I picked this one because I liked the breakdown, kind of showing what this process was. They had a fake site, zoommanager.com, delivered a loader that would exclude its own payload folder from Defender. Then it connected to a Steam community page for an IP address to download the next stage. Then it was, I didn't put it in the notes, Inno install, Inno something. A legit utility they used to create a script that installed both the legit Zoom package as well as injecting sectop rat into MS build to connect to the C2 server. And then about a week later, they launched a brute retel payload with a Cobalt Strike beacon, made it onto a DC, added a proxy, which they use for RDP access to start exfiltrating data. I mean, Jake, just talk to us a little bit about, why we see more of these versus kind of a more traditional download an infected package and that malware is going to run locally. And how do you look for these kind of fuzzier attacks that are happening across multiple stages and sometimes using legitimate tools on the system?
Yeah, definitely. First, shout out to DFR Report for putting together stuff like this. They're very consistent with like what you said, like not sensationalizing stuff, really breaking things down. So their site is a wealth of information just like this. But yeah, for this one specifically, so I've got a few specific things that I wanted to call out as I was reading through this article. One of the things, so like you said, they're downloading things in multiple steps. Sometimes that's done to reduce bandwidth and just kind of like hide amongst all the other traffic going on in the network. If you've got like one big download or you see like a big spike in traffic, that could be something enough to set off like an IPS or an IDS to alert you to something going on. So they're trying to keep their traffic under a certain amount sometimes, they being attackers. And then also sometimes these tools, it's as simple as they're just tools that are all like a whole bunch of different scrapped together tools that are just stitched together. A lot of these different providers, because this is a malware as a service, this specific loader that was mentioned in this article, it is a malware as a service loader. And a lot of times these things are just like traded around. They're worked on one dev, sold to another dev, worked on by a team. So sometimes it can be just like a whole bunch of different things stitched together, and then they buy those different components from different parts or it's developed in different areas. And then sometimes also they're built that way to make it easier to switch out different components. So if they happen to burn one part of their stack of their techniques, they can easily slot in some other technique or some other tool that will maybe fly under the radar, or even like include a new exploit that's learned about. It makes it a little bit more like building blocks like Legos. They can kind of like interchange and kind of change how they want things to work, because if threat actors were predictable, it'd make my job a lot easier. So their job is absolutely to make things as unpredictable as possible. And then, yeah, like you were saying, they're using a lot of the living off the land tools. Those are things that are built into Windows. Windows does a pretty good job at being able to reach out to the internet and do things that administrators want it to do. And those very same tools can be used by threat actors to do very similar things, but bad. So like downloads a bad thing and run a bad thing. The advantage of using like living off the land tools is they're signed by Microsoft and they usually don't set off any antivirus. So traditional antivirus is very signature based. So it's not going to set off any of those red alarms. It's not going to set off any kind of anything. It's going to fly under the radar really easily because it's just PowerShell. Who's gonna like, okay, yeah, PowerShell is something you should run. And the way you can try detect stuff like that is, like I said, not with signatures, but with the behavior. So doing something in PowerShell that is expected, like I can write a detection that like watches for all these different PowerShell commands, but that detection also is going to have that extra little secret sauce that is added that a lot of threat actors use. Like a lot of them will use encoded commands, for example, when they're doing PowerShell. because PowerShell will accept encoded commands. And that's not something that most administrators do. We do see some pieces of legitimate application doing that. But again, that's if you just search for encoded commands run by PowerShell, that immediately like narrows down what you're seeing. And then even from there, you can start to filter out and tune out the things that you're expecting. So yeah, those are the reasons they use those kinds of tools, is just to evade. But luckily, a lot of the things that they do with those tools afterwards, the actual behavior, the activity that they're doing with those are relatively predictable. And those are the things that we try to detect on.
Yeah,
Back to batch files.
right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is funny too. It's like there's a lot of software that's used in the workplace where it's like it does crazy stuff. Like you would be shocked at the amount of like shells things spawn and run scripts in the background. And it is like that is one way to hide in a haystack, is like just act like a normal piece of software, right? And then it's our job to basically go, well, 3 steps down or 4 steps down. Yeah, stuff doesn't do that normal, right? Like,
Right. Well, and it's
Yeah.
Sorry. I was just going to say one of the things that I know we see often on the support filtering tuning side, to Jake's point and to Mike's point, encoded commands are just the easiest way to provide clean commands into PowerShell. So you will see PSAs doing this. You will see RMMs doing this. You will see these remote shares doing it. And it can be very easy to say, well, I just won't look at this again. Same as for batch files. Like we know it's going to happen every time we run it, we'll just turn it off. But that is also, to Jake's point, how essentially every attacker is going to drop into your PowerShell at that point. So it's important to, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, to review these actions in your environment and make sure, like, yes, this one I did, that one I did not do, and make sure you have that clarity.
yeah, nobody I know should be running with WSL scripts, right? Like that's not something our company does, but apparently these things are, right? Like, so it's a great way to just like, I know what my org does. This is not what my org does.
Yeah, and the encoded commands is especially interesting to me because not only does it hide what's going on under the hood of like the actual commands that are running, but it also elevates the actual like required knowledge and experience of like having to review. And even if you do like know how to identify a base 64 encoded command, you can see it, you know what it is. It still takes you another extra minute to go and decode the thing. So it's like and not only are we increasing the knowledge and experience required to identify the thing and read it, but also go and decode it. And then that's just more time for the attackers to either like make more actions on their objectives, or yeah, just like continue to fly under the radar while the junior SecOps person goes and talks to the more senior person.
Yeah, or like trying to get into a Steam community to figure out, like where they're pulling it from or what account, right? Like it's just so much work.
Yeah. Well, and it's an interesting note that the legitimate installer is downloaded and run alongside the script, because it isn't just tactics to avoid systems-based detections, right? Like you're trying to keep your bandwidth down to avoid triggering that kind of alert, but also you don't want the user creating a ticket because they downloaded a Zoom installer that never actually installed Zoom. So there's almost a level of customer service to stay undercover that factors into these things.
Yep.
Yeah, the attacker's goal is to deliver an expected result to the victim. So if you're getting a malicious PDF, I mean, I don't think, like, me as the victim, I don't think it's malicious. But if I'm getting a PDF and I double click on it, I expect a PDF to open. And same thing with this Zoom installer. I expect Zoom to run. So just, yeah, another thing to help you fly under the radar and go a little bit further. Because if Zoom doesn't run, the victim is not necessarily going to think they're being attacked right away, but they definitely will call IT or help desk, and then that's when all the alarms go off and things go sideways as the attacker.
And then our last story this week, a story from some Sophos researchers highlighting how the Evilginx framework continues to be effective for circumventing some multi-factor authentication using adversary in the middle attack. For folks unfamiliar, Evilginx, as you may expect, is based off, or Evilginx is based off of Nginx. It's really hard to say without the N. Like my brain just doesn't want to do it because engine makes sense. Uh, is a kind of compromised reverse proxy. It's going to use an adversary in the middle attack, try and capture sessions tokens to bypass that MFA challenge. And then, yeah, Jake, you can probably tell us a little bit about what folks do. Did they go into Microsoft 365 and manage to bypass that challenge? What are they usually doing next?
Yeah, so Evilginx has been around for a while. It's been a pretty popular tool. Typically, what you'll see is it'll direct people to an MFA page, and it'll just intercept that MFA code and make it seem like nothing really happened for the victim. But then in the back end of things, the attacker ends up getting your MFA approved token, and then can kind of go out and do whatever they want from there. So with that token, and again, this kind of attack is called token theft. With that token, they can basically, at least in terms of M365, they can authenticate to M365 as if they were you. And then even more so, a lot of times you'll see them attackers take the token, and they won't just do simple things like log into Outlook and read your emails, or log into Excel to, like, I don't know, make some crazy formulas in your spreadsheets. They're typically like trying to hit Microsoft's Graph API, and then they're pulling down and enumerating more information from there. So you may not think like me as a victim, oh, what, they can just get access to my Outlook, like that's not a big deal. But typically that's not what attackers are doing, and they're making it so that they can enumerate your environment, find more email addresses that they can compromise, figure out where people are in groups so that they can target valuable accounts, those kinds of things. So that's usually what they're trying to do once they get those session tokens.
Again, pivot isn't just a systems-based tactic. It also can be applied to identity, right? If they can get that foothold, then they're going to try and leverage that and get the next leg up.
Yeah.
Mike, is that why we only use email and SMS passcodes for MFA?
It's like I feel like we spent decades basically telling people to turn 2FA on everywhere, right? Like in your personal, like everything at your org, turn 2FA on if it's got a login, right? And then like in the industry, we all knew what strong 2FA meant. But we did a terrible job telling people, because there is a lot of default MFA methods that are very weak, right? SMS being one of them, email codes, debatable depending on how it's set up. Even one-time passcodes, everyone thought those were very strong. Nope. You just fire up Evilginx. I've run it myself, and it's a transparent proxy. And I mean, like, it's transparent, right? Like, it pulls up the actual Microsoft login page. It pulls up the actual Google login page. It looks no different to you. It's just hosting it in, and basically man in the middling your browser is what happens, right? So you're getting a valid token, you're logging in, you're giving it your 2FA. It has that as well, right? It just grabs the 2FA token and then immediately grabs a session, and then off to the Graph API or whatever API you need, right? Like this isn't just Microsoft that it works on, right? It works on pretty much most login windows, unless you can do some crazy stuff. But it's very common. And once you have that Graph API or whatever API session token, those don't expire, and they also typically don't require 2FA, right? So like you're past all your controls, you're authorized. It's just how it works. There is pretty much like one or two MFA methods that actually block this type of thing, which is FIDO keys and pass keys, which you may have heard of, right? It's a newer newer option, right? Device based or biometric based passkeys. It's a like something that all browsers support nowadays. Most devices have them as well, right? Set those up. Set passkeys up. You can use hardware based FIDO keys. Those are probably the most secure. And then passkey based, probably the second most secure. And one of the biggest reasons why is they have a baked in URL into each key, which basically means like you cannot use it at a different place, right? So if you try to proxy the connection in between you and Microsoft, the key will just be like, nope, doesn't work, right? Like my crypto says this isn't valid. Sorry. So like it is one of the only ways to stop that attack, aside from monitoring for all the stuff that happens afterwards.
Yeah, and we've been doing a lot of work too to try and like make detections for session token theft. We do have existing detections that will cover it, but it's like a constantly moving target when threat actors change how they're doing things, and Microsoft especially changing how they log these things. Primarily right now, we've been focused on, I don't want to make any promises in terms of what detections are being pushed out, but we're working on more of like anomaly-based detections. So we're focusing more on events where the system or the session ID stays the same, but then other things change. So like you may have the same session ID, but your IP is different, your browser is different, your agent, the user agent is different, and then also what things you're doing. So all of these things combined with the same session across multiple of those things, they're all kind of we're working on making it so those things can be calculated, and then we will raise an alert when enough red flags have gone off. So that's it. It's a constantly moving target with session token theft. It's a difficult thing to detect. But yeah, it is something that we're still actively working towards. And then in the meantime, obviously, your like one-off your impossible travel detections, detections like that will also tell you when things are going weird, because you have if someone steals a token and then they use that same token somewhere else, and your user's already got that token in a spot and it's over X number of miles, that's something you can also use as like an anomaly to detect some weird stuff going on.
Yeah, I have one tip too, aside from just checking your auth settings and what MFA you allow, right? Like go as strong as you can, right? The other thing you can do on the Microsoft side is if you're not familiar with Canary tokens, you can grab free Canary tokens. Thinkst is a company, they do great work. They run a free service. You can grab a Canary token, and Microsoft allows you to edit your login page with HTML. Slap a token in there. If it ever shows up not from Microsoft, you can get alerts on that. So like people are trying to proxy your login page specifically, right? Just kind of a quick tip. Maybe we can throw some notes.
I was going to say, we'll put a link in the description so folks can get more info on that. Last thing I want to touch on this story before we close it out for this week. So, Mike, if we looked at phishing education training that a lot of folks are going to have to do contractually, either for compliance or for their insurance policies, we're going to see a lot of advice that may not necessarily apply today. Look for a green lock icon, look for misspellings or low quality images, all of these kind of visual indicators that something is amiss. What does it look like to do awareness training when there is no difference between the legitimate page and the page that's being presented to the user to capture that token?
Yeah, we are like rapidly reaching a state where there are minuscule differences, or it is exactly the same, right? Like with AI, you can spin up the campaigns pretty easily. You can make them language natural, right? Like not just English. Like that's longer the days of like gone of misspelled words, right? If I see a broken SSL in an attack, I'm kind of just like, how lazy are these people, right? Like, so I typically, it's good to basically, I guess the way I prefer to do it is educate users on security, right? Not necessarily on how to spot phishing attacks, right? Like you can talk about this exact scenario, right, with your users. Let them know. You can kind of try to translate it into their into their normal language, right? Like maybe not as many details, but here's what you might see, right? And then more importantly, here's what you might see afterwards, right? Like you might see an email from Microsoft saying like, hey, we granted access to X, Y, and Z, or we noticed you logged in and it was a bit weird, right? Like that's the kind of stuff you're looking for in those scenarios, because you can only do your best as far as stopping people from clicking links, entering credentials, right? Like you have to basically start protecting against the successful attacks and successful links, or making it so that that's not a thing, right? Like limit the access to Graph API, right? Like limit what your users can do. You're more just like having to understand that these things will happen, and then be able to respond quickly and shut stuff down.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it makes it even more clear that we can't say that the answer is train the users better. We have to go back to building a better process that accounts for it or limits the risk if it happens, right?
You can always do a good job of educating your users, though, right? Like it makes things a lot easier down the road. Like if you're never talking to them about this stuff, like they just won't talk to you about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, I think ending this with defense in depth is still important, and least access still important. Like what we learned 10, 20 years ago still applies now. It'd be great if like we beat that with technology, but alas, here we are. And they still work. Still work.
Well, check the description all for more information on these stories and what you can do to stay safe. As always, we're here to help get you that information and make your life a little bit easier so that you don't have to follow the same news feeds that I do. Until next week, thank you all for joining. Thank you, the audience, for watching, and we'll see you back here next Friday for another edition of Blumira Briefings. Bye, everybody.